Good morning, everybody. So welcome to our webinar that's going to discuss and in more detail cover implementing modern coding solutions to accelerate sales processes. We'll get to intros in a little bit, but before we continue, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be discussing first. And effectively, this is going to be a more technical deep dive into an architecture of a system that Concurrency has implemented in the past. We continue to build upon this systems like this and also adapt to different scenarios for our clients. And we've done this multiple times over the years, and we felt that it was a good idea to start sharing some of this newfound knowledge and expose some of these tips for success and get going in that area. And without further ado, we'll get to our presenters. So we can start with Brian, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, Brian Hayden. I'm a solution architect at Concurrency, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with everybody.
Nice. Thank you, Brian. And then there's myself, Mac Kravitz. I'm a senior software developer here at Concurrency. I've taken part in building numerous implementations that pertain specifically to this. And I'm excited to just share a little bit more of that, the ins and outs and some of the more technical gotchas that we've run into in the past. So let's talk a little bit about what we would want in the perfect sales scenario, right? Everybody wants to make money and they want to make money quick. And the best way to do it is, hey, a client reaches out to me, asks for something, and an automated process just orders it. And that's beautiful. But that's not where we're at. And in a lot of cases, there's a lot of steps that have to be taken to make that happen. And even then, not a lot of businesses or business concepts apply to that idea. And so while this is the North Star, understanding that there is a lot of companies that are maybe not anywhere near there, we're going to be talking about a more progressive, incremental step towards this end goal of a very quick sales process and with little overhead. And one of the things that you're going to see throughout this webinar are little tidbits that we've heard from our clients that make this even more meaningful to us, but also we feel more meaningful to you and your businesses. Now, if your sales cycle is longer than some other industries, right? From what I've heard in the past, manufacturing industries have a very quick sales cycle. They turn around in minutes, where this kind of a quote applies. If it's a little bit different than that, maybe it's a few months. This is still applicable to a certain degree in a sense of when you engage with a client first and you do it quickly, that resonates with them. So the company that takes weeks to respond, even though the sales cycle is expected to be 6 months, if you get back quickly, that makes them feel valued. So these quotes help, drive that point a little bit further. But effectively, let's talk about our textbook CPQ process, right? We configure or in some way, shape, or form design our product or service and make it known that that's in some sort of list of data, that's what it is. Then we have a process where we price those items. We have a process where we quote it based on some inquiry. We draft a proposal. We start negotiating with depending on the proposal. And then we finalize and we order. And each checkpoint in this process that you're seeing offers in and of itself the potential to be a bottleneck. And a bottleneck most often is human. Whether it's somebody being on PTO, whether it's somebody being, busy with 5 other quotes or 6 other engagements. The more involvement and the more steps along the way you have, the higher likelihood that there is for a longer drawn out process. And if you think back to that quote a second ago, the first one to respond gets the business. This textbook CPQ process doesn't really head in the direction that we want of quick business turnaround. That being said, though, keeping in mind the North Star that we just discussed earlier, that's the North Star for a reason. We want to get there. And in a lot of ways, and in a lot of industries, it's incremental processes that have to occur in order to get there. So one of the things that we've implemented for our clients is this streamlined CPQ process, which is effectively taking out and leading to a very quick turnaround of the price and quote system or steps within the process, and effectively going straight from, hey, let's figure out what we're selling, and then going straight to, here's what we can here's what we can sell you, how much it costs, and what it is exactly. And the beauty of it is that in our history with our clients, we've literally turned processes that take 15, 30 minutes in the perfect scenario where there is a sales rep sitting at a desk looking at their email and waiting to take care of a quote. We've taken that perfect scenario and turned it into seconds with now no sales rep involvement. The sales rep at worst has to hit send and send the quote. And let's talk a little bit about, before we continue and get to the more technical fun part, let's talk about the importance of AI in this process, in our quoting process. And I only have one word for it, and that is unequivocal. Our system, the system that we've built for clients, is built around a Python environment that makes use of Azure OpenAI or a supplementary LLM to accomplish a task. And it's not always Azure OpenAI, and it's not always this specific LLM, and so on and so forth. That really depends on some of the decisions that we make during the building process or the design process. But effectively, where we're at is that the days of rules-based engines and process maps, if this, do that, it was over shortly after the spotlight of shown onto the artificial intelligence in all business aspects. And that's what we've built around, and we continue to grow in that aspect. And as AI matures and our system matures, effectively the quality of our output does too. And what I like about this visualization is that to me it paints a perfect picture of an AI-driven system's capability to provide a quality output with time. And you start small and go big, and the speed at which you get there varies depending on the data that you have and how good the data that you have is. We have clients that have been with us for numerous years that have gotten here. We have clients that have started their journeys recently, but effectively we can take these years of experience that we have in this area to allow us to foster clients to getting there in a much better, much quicker way. Brian, do you have anything to add? Any notable mentions?
No, I think you're doing I don't have a ton to add. I do see a lot of customers finding a lot of value in that time to quote, aspect of it that you talked about. And even, the most, the 15 minutes to seconds, right? Even if you can get, that's a really high volume kind of transactionary, sort of tail. But, these same systems can be used to take something that might take days or hours, which is more common with our customers, and reduce that to seconds or minutes. And the value that automation or the cognizant load that is removed from the salesperson, so they can focus on maybe more upselling opportunities, rather than just the transactional quote, is also kind of a value add to that. And we're talking with a lot of customers around that.
Yeah, exactly. So moving on, meaningful data gathering should be at the forefront of any system you implement. That is where it is at the forefront of this architecture that we have and the systems that we've implemented in this space. But I really think that this is the truth for every single system in today's world. For no other reason than data strategy should be at the core of a business strategy. Where we're at in this, today with data and how it operates and the value it provides to a business, simply underline the necessity to make sure that the data that we gather is the focal point, and very much so in our processes and our approaches to building these systems. That is the central focus. But with that being said, though, let's talk a little bit about the architecture and what we can integrate this with, and how it actually really works. But basically, I've been talking about the system. Effectively, what we've done for our clients is providing a process to ingest requests for quotes or just inventory checks, to effectively turn those and provide and turn those around in seconds. And you might imagine that, if you focus here, you might imagine that a sales representative will receive an email to their inbox, and that gets picked up by our system that reads that email and pulls out specific information about a product that they are interested in. It connects with our ERP and then pulls a SKU and price for that and formulates a quote inside of a CRM and sends it over to the client, all in seconds, right? A human no longer has to read the email. They no longer have to understand the product. They no longer have to look up the price. They no longer have to create the quote. All of it taking time and all of it being, again, a potential for a bottleneck. That all happens seemingly in seconds. And you can do the same with a phone conversation. In today's world, I mean, everybody's recording every conversation they have in their business. And you can imagine that this very easily extends to just a transcript. And we use artificial intelligence to listen to that and decipher it in the same way that we do with an email. And that also can occur with an external system, right? Any other systems that we start talking about, see, there's potential to include that. But let's focus on one scenario, right? The scenario that we're going to focus on is this exchange integration. Let's integrate this system with our mailboxes and let our salespeople spend the time, to Brian's point, upselling rather than data entry and quoting. So, and we're going to get back to the overarching specific points of this conversation, but one of the things that we've heard from our client is that it can take a few months to teach sales reps about the products that we sell. And that just underlines the importance of this system. Once it's out there and once it's trained and AI is performing to do and doing what we need it to do, we effectively have made it so a sales representative doesn't have to understand the ins and outs and every single item on the inventory, or if it's some sort of industry, they don't have to understand the industry very intimately to be able to do their job. AI will help and effectively pick up the slack and let those sales representatives be sales representatives rather than specialists in a specific product that they sell. There's people for that. And sometimes sales representatives are better when they are left to do what they excel at, which is selling. And that's why I think that quote was, when I heard it, I remembered it, right? And there's a reason I remembered it, and there's a reason why it's on the slide. But let's talk a little bit about the as pertains to this architecture diagram. Let's talk a little bit about the onset of this process. What kicks it off? And you might imagine that in our business we have multiple sales representatives, and those emails that they receive all get funneled to a single shared mailbox, and that shared mailbox is the focal point and the kickoffs area for our automated process. And it allows us to monitor email ingestion, and it's also easy to manage user access to the system. So this shared mailbox is connected directly to the system. It's the only functionality that it serves. And in Exchange admin, your teams can then just add an email to automated forwarding, and they now have access to this system. And there are a few technical gotchas in this space. We've seen issues arise with things like BCC, where BCC is a blind copy, right? So effectively, this approach doesn't have access to blind copies. That being said, though, there's other things that you can do to extend it further and make sure that you factor that in. And then there's also email identification. This might not be very clear in the right away, but once you start seeing and you're processing thousands and thousands of emails, you might find yourself that every 100th, every 200th email gets skipped. And that is because Exchange offers up conversation IDs and Outlook email IDs, none of which are necessarily they're going to be unique between mailboxes is one, but sometimes they're going to be unique also within the context of a conversation in and of itself. That poses some issues that we've had to parse in the past to make sure that we are able to identify emails accordingly. Another gotcha here is with the shared mailbox, sometimes the way that Microsoft clears their cache after removing an automated forwarding process, it might not necessarily remove it for another 24 hours. So there's a few gotchas in this area, but that is our ingestion process. And it doesn't come without its own share of concerns. And one of the concerns that when I was talking through this with Brian was, we funnel into this logic app, right, that we're going to talk about a little bit. And the concern that we've heard in the past was, hey, you're listening to all of our emails. This process is going through and potentially sending every single email in our organization to an artificial intelligence platform. And it doesn't quite work that way. The design is such that there's a logic application with some entry-level rules-based filtering to ensure that, hey, what we're reading or what we're scanning is effectively relevant to our topic. So it may look for specific words like quote or some specific terms in the subject, or it can't be from this email address. And that is a way for us to, one, solve some privacy concerns, right? We've had concerns with HIPAA and so on and so forth that we've had to take care of. But two, also offer a low-cost filter for the remainder of the system. It allows us to free up some precious resources downstream. And then moving on from the logic application, we have our Azure function, and that is the central piece of this entire conversation. It is what integrates with every other downstream process. It is what integrates with the logic application. Because of this, we're able to effectively do this. It is the way that, on a more technical note, it's using in most recent days, we've upgraded to .NET 8. making full use of dependency injection. I like personally to build with the service repository build pattern. I personally think it's a nice clean way to separate your areas of concern. And this Azure function, as I mentioned, because of its centerpiece in integration, makes use of Graph API to further integrate with everything that happened before, with our shared mailbox and so on and so forth. But then downstream, right, where if, for example, we're integrating with Dynamics 365, we're making use of the CRM SDK to make sure that we can, create a lead, create an opportunity, and things of that nature. And then moving on to, so one of the things, as a quick aside, I when I was thinking through this, I was like, what is the focal point here? What's the most important thing? Is it Azure Functions? Is it the database? Is it the AKS? There is no easy way for me to say, but everything is important. But there are degrees to which they're more important and less important. And I think one of them is our database. Data is at the center of this application. And as I said it before, your business strategy is your data strategy. That's something I've heard from very reputable people. And this architecture and the way that the system is designed is meant to facilitate the collection of meaningful data. What does that mean? If you have good data at hand, you're going to improve your artificial intelligence output quicker. If you are collecting the right data, you may turn around an iteration of an improved LLM from potentially waiting months to get data to weeks, because of the sheer fact that, hey, we have this at our fingertips. And there's engagements that I've been on where we've had so much data that we ideated and said, hey, let's create a model to do X, and our teams went back and implemented the system, taught an LLM and did it because they had data. And then we had engagements where we started and found ourselves, we can do this, but we lack the data to be able to fully implement it. And effectively, what that put us at is a position where we needed to keep that in mind, put a pin in it. We'll come back to it once we launch and gather data, and then we can start to iterate. So data is a very important topic in this system. And then there is the moneymaker. I did mention that AI is unequivocally important here, and this is a webinar in and of itself, but effectively where we're at with this is we run a containerized Python environment that receives things like the transcript of the conversation, the body of the email, the subject of the email, to effectively decipher it and attribute specific rules, and translate it into something that we can use to work with, right? So a huge blob of text email that is requesting us to, give me the price of a cup of coffee, a large cup of coffee. Obviously, I'm minimizing the problem here, but we'll get an email requesting that. This system, by virtue of being trained to read emails like that, will take that and transfer and translate it into a tabular format that we can then use to query against other database and push it downstream, and integrate it with other systems therein. And then once we've went through the flow that we've roughly discussed, right? So keeping in mind that we're at the end of our journey of this process, but you might imagine that at a very high level, a new email comes in, it goes through the logic app, we confirm that it is, my apologies, that it is indeed a quote, and we do that here. We send it through our Azure function, which amongst data transformations and storing it in databases and logging events, the main focus of what it does is it also sends that data to AI. AI is able to decipher that email, translate it into something that is pertinent to us, to our product. It spits it back to our Azure function, and then what? We need to do something with it. It needs to provide value to our business. And we do that by integrating with some other external system that is in use today, which brings me to our integration piece. The way that we've architected this system, we allow for the integration of different products at the onset, during the ingestion, but also during the downstream processes. What does that mean? If, for example, all of your products, going back to the CPQ concept, if all of your products are stored in SAP, we're able to integrate our system with that and feed our product data from there and use that to drive good data being sent back into your CRM. And effectively, the possibilities are endless in terms of integration here. We've done this in multiple ways with multiple vendors, with multiple platforms, sometimes custom CRMs as well, depending on the engagement. But effectively, if there was not an integration piece and we couldn't take a quote and get it into some shape or form and push it out to a CRM, then this would be moot. And the ability to do that is imperative. And that is the architecture really at a very high level of how it works and what it does and the pieces that come together. But let's talk a little bit about how we actually deploy this and manage this, maintain this. We'll talk a little bit about Terraform. For those who haven't heard of Terraform in the past, we'll give it a little 101 session. But then we're also going to discuss some strategies for that, for deploying your infrastructure, and really how all the intricacies of that. So without further ado, let's talk Terraform. What is Terraform? Terraform is an infrastructure as code software tool that can easily be used to deploy applications to multiple cloud providers, Azure being the one that we specialize in. What are the benefits of Terraform? There's version control integration. You can deploy an entire application landing zone in seconds. In fact, you can deploy an entire enterprise landing zone in seconds as well. You standardize the deployment workflow. And honestly, for the folks on this call, we could have a webinar just for Terraform as well, and a few hours at that. But it is imperative in the system effectively. The holy grail in the Terraform ecosystem is its state as it applies to an application. Terraform state is effectively a way to determine if changes have been made. It's used for change management. It's a log of, hey, the last time I executed these scripts, this is what I deployed. And when we go ahead and deploy a second time, it checks against the Terraform state to know what changes to make. And it is and we'll get to that a little bit later on, but effectively it is storing a lot of those keys and data that it deploys in a very raw format. It doesn't obfuscate any keys or passwords. And when I say it's the holy grail, and I mean it because in some way, shape, or form, if for whatever reason it found itself to be hacked, then that could pose some issues. And that is why we separate that areas of concern, and in our architecture often find that in a storage account of its own, locked down with various firewall policies and access control. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And here on the screen, I have an example of a Terraform script used to deploy a Azure SQL Server and Azure SQL database. And at a glance, right, even to those untrained in Terraform, I think it's rather easy to determine, kind of see what's going on here. First of all, that we're going to deploy a SQL Server. We're going to point it at some sort of resource group name, and then we're going to deploy a SQL database, and it's going to be tied to this SQL Server ID. And the point I'm making here is Terraform, for its rather simplistic way of reading it, serves to improve our business, our deployment processes significantly, in that we can write a Terraform script to deploy an entire application landing zone once and then never have to worry about it, or at least minimize the overhead with maintaining it. And let's say for one reason or another, we start with a dev environment and a production environment, and we find ourselves to need a third environment for staging or QA. You can deploy a third environment in seconds versus having to go out and ask your IT department to create a new environment, and then they have to point and click and create all these resources on their own. So these scripts or Terraform as a whole, are hugely helpful to streamlining development processes. And let's talk a little bit about GitHub Actions and how they tie in with Terraform. One thing I was mentioning before is that this concept of Terraform state and how it's the holy grail in our architecture, it sits elsewhere, completely segmented on its own in its own storage account for no other reason than nobody really but our pipelines should be accessing this. Only our pipelines should be going in and saying, hey, have I updated? Have I changed something? If I haven't, cool. If I have, then I know that I need to overwrite this. But effectively, in our system somewhere, we have a Terraform state file, and there's multiple methodologies to deploy infrastructure using Terraform. Some teams do it using approaching it from a completely separate repository, completely separate area that they deploy their code from, that they deployed their infrastructure and their application from. Some of them do it alongside. So effectively, as part of your exact same code repository and the exact same deployment pipelines, you're always redeploying your infrastructure. And there's pros and cons to both. Depending on the size of your implementation, you might find yourself, it might be that a large enough project it'll be better off to deploy it separately for no other reason than just visibility and making sure that we have a good handle of what's going in and what's changing. If it's a smaller project, then oftentimes you'll see it deploy alongside, where there is just no need to segment it to that degree. And then there is the next level of Terraform segmentation, and something that I've seen is deploying infrastructure in pieces. So you might imagine that in line with these highlights that the logic app is deployed separately because in the system it serves as its own area of concern. There is the application at large, the .NET, the API, the database that's deployed together, and then you deploy your AKS along with your Python environment separately as well. And there is no, it's kind of like React development where the best practices are fluid. The same applies with Terraform, where these standards are sometimes more fluid depending on your use case. But with that said, let's talk a little bit about GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions offers, and this GitHub offers a native support for Terraform. So what you're seeing here is a snippet of code that can run my Terraform scripts and deploy my infrastructure in a total of 3 steps, 4 steps if you count the checking out of a branch, which I wouldn't. But effectively, the reason why this is so powerful is because I've had the pleasure of doing this in Azure DevOps, and I've spent years working in Azure DevOps, and I love it to death. But setting up Terraform is a little bit more of an involved process, so much so that it's something we consider into the overhead of setting up the project, and depending on the size of the project, you just might not do it. But with GitHub Actions, you can do it all in this amount of effort of work, and that really opens it up to the viability of using Terraform with GitHub Actions, and underlines just how helpful it's going to be going forward. And effectively, it completely integrates with our Terraform scripts as it is. We can set the workspace that we're in from within these arguments in our GitHub Actions, and effectively use this to very quickly deploy entire infrastructures while setting up a brand new project.
Before you go on, what about our customers in DevOps? Like, how would they solve that same problem instead of GitHub Actions?
How do you mean?
Like for the deployment automation, I mean, can we still do that in Azure DevOps?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've done that multiple times. It's 100% doable. Once you do it once, it's not at all difficult. That being said, it takes a little bit more of an effort to implement that in ADO versus GitHub Actions. But with Azure DevOps, you could solve this problem by we're executing some PowerShell scripts from within your pipeline agent that effectively set up your Terraform container and set your workspace, and then run your plan, and then and ultimately apply your Terraform plan. Those are all things that you have to specify and write on your own. As a matter of fact, depending on your pipeline agent, you might even have to install Terraform from the beginning on your agent. So it's doable. It's been done for years now. We're used to it, but I've had the pleasure now of also, coming to the new age, which is this, and now I can effectively do it in 3 steps. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, I was just planting a question to get the conversation going.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and there's other ways to do it too. You and I were talking yesterday about being able to do some of these deployments natively in Terraform Cloud or other ways as well. So great.
Yeah, and like I was saying, Terraform is a webinar in and of itself.
Yeah.
I've used it multiple times. I'm adept at it, but there's a lot of other facets to Terraform that need to be uncovered. Let's talk a little bit about the maturity curve of AI in our products and applications. And one of the things that I recently I've come to a realization is there is a significant amount of companies that are still down here. There's a lot of companies that still operate out of Excel, manage their business in Excel, some big, large, some smaller than others, but they do. And we've taken companies just like that to about this area of the maturity curve, just by virtue of implementing this system that we've been discussing for the last 30 minutes. Effectively, there is little effort overall to get to the machine learning aspect of, hey, we are now able to predict that Mac wants to buy this and it's going to cost that much money, and let's quote him that all in seconds. The overhead to jump from here to here is relatively low, and the amount of effort that we need to put to make that happen is relatively low. And that just one thing I wanted to highlight, because you might find yourself to be that client, that company, right, where you are operating out of Excel, and using AI seems like something so abstract, and I'm telling you it's not. It's something that can be done in a relatively short term, and you can see the fruits of that work turn around pretty quickly.
You bring up a really good point. I mean, you've been working on some of these CPQ solutions for years now. And I remember, some of our earlier projects, taking years to get to a point that you can now get to in months,
Yes.
or even weeks, right? The innovation, the newer innovations, in the Microsoft stack, absolutely enable this to go so much quicker. And we haven't even scratched the surface. I mean, Semantic Kernel's coming out. That's going to help with a lot of the agent and orchestration work. There's so much, coming out in the pipeline. And with Microsoft Build coming up next, in the next couple of weeks, there's probably going to be a lot more announcements as well. Do you have any thoughts about that, Mac, in terms of, how much quicker this might actually, this might actually be?
Yeah. So to your earlier point that we've seen our clients, some take years, and now we're at a point where it's months. There is no reason that this can't be reduced to weeks now too. To your point, there's things coming down the pipeline, and there's a huge focus in the Microsoft space to accelerate this even further, and bring our everyday companies to this stage. Um, and my thoughts are, let it happen effectively, and we're here to ride the wave. And Brian, if you want to talk a little bit about some of the next steps that we can offer to make this a reality for anybody on the call.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a lot of these workshop sessions with our customers directly. So if you want us to come and speak with your organization, we are more than happy to do that. One of the first steps that we would do is getting started with a group envisioning session or an executive envisioning session. And where this could be anywhere from a couple hours to a half day, sort of a workshop environment where we introduce you to some of the capabilities of AI, what art of the possible things can, get the creative juices, flowing within the organization, and then maybe, do some breakout sessions. We can do this virtually, we can do this on site. And an output of this that we deliver for our customers is a value analysis, where it's kind of a breakdown, and we help you, stack rank, some of the ideas that come out of this, and work on next steps. Here's an example of an agenda, for, like, that sort of half day, few hour, type of workshop. Again, we'll do a art of the possible, sort of expose you to, some of the things that we're doing and other customers are doing in this space. And then, get out into the breakout session. We can make it really fun. Here in this agenda, we've got like prizes and winners and stuff like that, but we'll work with you to figure out what makes sense for the organization. Um, After we've gone through the envisioning session, typically what our customers want to do is break out, one or two items that on the value analysis might be, low to medium to implement, kind of get your feet wet. And we'll help evaluate the scenarios, and look at how you might want to pursue that. So there is a survey included at in the link here in the chat. And if you want to work with us on one of these envisioning sessions and maybe explore what a pilot would look like, fill out the survey and indicate that you'd like us to reach out to you. Again, our program starts usually with the executive envisioning session. And we would like to get the leadership of the organization before we do a full group. And we can also, as a Microsoft partner in the AI space, help look at possibilities for Microsoft to fund some of these events. And with that, thank you very much, and look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, everybody.